Whoa, we're back from Bleach Soul Resonance, and we're going to be talking about, I guess, who remains after the dust settles. We now have essentially pretty strong confirmation that we will be getting a new typing, and while I've continued to say, let's just make it 80%, let's just make it 90%, just in case there's some sort of translation error, we can kind of move forward with the idea that there's only like a 10 or 20% chance that it's not that thing. So let's just move forward with the idea that it is a new typing. If you're wondering how I feel about a new typing, here's the reality. I'm not going to be like, oh my god, Shueisha, because it's not really Shueisha this time. I think what ended up happening is there was a Q&A forever ago, back when the Q&As were really bad, back when it was like dev notepad, like translation streams, and it was essentially, we don't really have plans to add a new type this early, because it got asked early. So what I think that meant is this was probably always a thing. It was either going to be Quincy's or, you know, TYBW just in general or something like that. But obviously they got information that the TYBW collab was moving up because of Core 4, and they were like, well, this is our obligation. We have to make the TYBW characters. I do think it's like, I'm not going to be like, oh, boo-hoo, they were forced to make TYBW, because I'm sure this is going to be a very successful period for them. I'm just saying that they're shaking hands right now, you know what I mean? Shueisha wants advertisement for TYBW, and Newverse is happy to, you know, have TYBW in the game. So, with all that said, essentially, I think that this was probably always going to be a thing, but maybe not this fast. So, with that in mind, like, I've sort of moved myself down, and, you know, we have this list here that we did before. So we had, this was supposed to be a stand-in for Vastalord, and then the rest of this was just Slash characters I think could come after TYBW. The rest were just Spirit characters I think could come after TYBW, so on and so forth, until at some point we get to Anniversary and, you know, the like. Obviously, there are way too many characters here before first Anniversary. I have just placed them where I think they could. I've just placed the characters I think will show up. Now, who do I actually think will show up? So, we have Bambi, probably our tactics character. We have Yuryu, most certainly our DPS, our full DPS character. And we have Candace, most certainly our support character. What that means is that after all of this settles, we should have a very open landscape. What is our landscape open to? Well, currently, if we're thinking about the game as it exists right now, Kenpachi does not have a support. And where's Grimjo? Grimjo does not have a support. So, a lot of people are saying that the list should probably look something like this, right? We can all sort of agree that the list probably looks something like this in terms of like expectations. I would say that Shinji, Shunsui, Vastalord Ichigo, obviously. I know this isn't literally Vastalord Ichigo, but I didn't see his face down here anywhere. So I'm assuming they don't count him in this as a different character. They just count him as a form, which is true enough. Because, yeah. So it's like, I assume the list looks something like this, right? We could get, like, oh, and I would honestly go as far as to say that Yunohana is a support, Yukitake is a support, Dark as a DP. Oh, actually, he could stay around. Maybe we remove him as well. I could see him. Yeah, let's say he'd probably fit into the supporting role. So this is essentially what we end up looking at as an expectation sort of going forward after TYBW, right? We have Stark and Adabel, who could quite easily end up being a tactics character replacing Aizen. I think either of these characters would be fine as a tactics character. Also, it forms the Espada team, which I did talk about character identity before, that, you know, it would have been cool if Okieta was like a dual support character because he doesn't want to work with anybody. He only wants to be, you know, he wants to be the sort of the main center of attention, blah, blah, blah. But if we're just talking within the realms of like, okay, well, what if we just put a Espada on the team? It would be kind of cool to have like a team of just Espada, move Aizen out, get either Adabel or Stark in. I do think these characters are both hyped enough to follow up TYBW. I know that Stark has detracted, but let's be honest, if you if you are a Stark detractor, but you like Harabel, you have an addiction to materials. Because both of these characters are frauds. There's no reason you should like one over the other. Slash ends up falling into a pretty unique space. I said before that TYBW Yachiru obviously would not be the character that shows up. But this is the picture they have of her. But I think that a Yachiru could make an SSR. I don't think it's like an unbelievable thing to imagine her as being an SSR character. She's already an SR character in the game. She is important to Kenpachi. Kenpachi is currently the... Sorry, my phone dinged. Kenpachi is, of course, the main DPS of Slash and will be for at least a little bit longer. So I think easily fitting in a Yachiru there to pair with him would be cool. Old Man Zangetsu is a great example. So there was a time where I think we kind of got our wires crossed, to me at least. So Soifon, Mayuri, and Zayalaparo released, right? And I think what ended up happening is people think, well, people don't want to pull for supports. I don't think that's true. I actually was talking about this in the Bleach Soul Resonance Discord earlier, in the Leaks and Discussions tab. I don't think people don't want to pull for supports. I think people didn't want to pull for Mayuri because he's a niche character. He has so many like visuals and like styles that you probably have a version of Mayuri that to you is like, that's my favorite Mayuri. But in totality, you might not like Mayuri overall. I always like Mayuri. I think he's a cool character. I think he's a cool design. I think Tite Kubo's strength is that even when a character isn't like written the best, they usually look really cool. He's just a great designer of characters. JJK is a lot like that. I've talked about this before. JJK is not a particularly well-written story to me. Only to me. It's serviceable. It's fine. But the strength of Gigi is he's good at designs. He's even great at designs. A lot of cool characters have come out of JJK just at a base level. So yeah, I think what ended up happening is people think that, okay, well, these characters didn't do well, so even if they're good, people just don't want to pull for supports. I don't think that's the case. Soifon was another example. She was a supporty tactics character. And because she's not... I don't know. It's the Gohan thing in Dokkan Battle. If you drop a Gohan, everyone will talk about how good that Gohan actually is. But if you drop Metal Cooler, who's literally the best character in the game for the last like 2 or 3 months, everyone's like, I don't know, one of the best characters ever, really? But if you were to put that same kit on a Gohan, they'd be like, he's the greatest unit that's ever existed in Dokkan Battle. I think that kind of happened to Soifon as well, where she obviously has her fans, but being a supporty tactics character, we had already built up a sort of expectation of tactics characters as being sort of like carries, essentially. But it didn't help her, certainly. But also, she's not the most hyped character, especially in this trio of just like low hype right here. Where like there are people who like these characters, but it is not the same, right? So I think Old Man Zangetsu, to get back to the original point, is a character who is hype enough and is also necessary because people, one, they grew up with this motherfucker. He's like in some of the earliest episodes are him facing off, having conversations with Ichigo. He's an aura merchant. He has a reveal, nudge, nudge. And I don't know. He's just a cool character. He's cool looking. Again, another great example of Tite Kubo just having great designs. Like I think he's just really cool. Next we have the Slash support. It could really be anyone, but it can't be Yami, and it really can't be Chad. I think Chad, when he does show up, and Yami, when he does show up, will just be the DPSs that sort of replace each other. Not all at once or anything, not one after the other, but like at some point, Yami will be a DPS, and at some point, Chad will probably be a DPS. One thing I could see Chad doing is being a tactics character who like grapples and holds you like the character down, so he has sort of like a stunning effect. That'd be pretty cool. Like maybe his identity is that he makes rotations just flatly easier. It's like with other characters, you have to worry about dodging and all this stuff. But with Chad, it's almost like you're fighting the training dummy because he's like punching and holding the character. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, back to Orihime, Bedagon, and Otagoat. Oh my goat, I should say. Could be the supports. I've seen a lot of people say Baragon. I would prefer if this character is a tactics character personally. It is kind of funny, but again, we just moved back over here. We're coming up on these guys being replaced, and I know that's weird to think about, but if I had to list all of the characters who, well, Gin has already been replaced, all the characters who are being replaced, like, sooner rather than later, it looks something like this. And is anyone else down here that has been around for a while? Okieta hasn't been around for a while. Grimjo, I would say after them, Grimjo could probably go. But the thing about it is they're going to replace DPSs faster a lot of the times because DPS characters are just more plentiful. I mean, it's always, again, it's easy to sell a DPS character. It's not as easy to sell a support character. Even though, again, I do think support characters are something people want. But, oh, the other character that is going to be fading out soon is obviously this one right here. So this is sort of a lineup of like who's on the chopping block. So it becomes one of those things where it's like, could I see Baragon eventually showing up during this next 3-ish months where they need to fill time before anniversary? Yeah, I kind of could actually. Like, I guess it would be like, yeah, like 3 months. Yeah, 3-ish months. Like, I kind of could. Even though, again, I don't think it'll happen. So I will keep him here as like a possible support character, but I do think it is much more likely to me, or hopeful to me, that we get him something else. Omegle, I just cannot see this character being an SSR. That cannot be our month-long SSR, I think. So it really does come down to looking something like this. And it's not a bad list. It's not a bad list for sure. Spirit needs a tactics character, Slash needs a support, and Strike needs a support. Is there anyone else that could be released in that time? Again, it's not impossible that maybe we get like a Noituda who is a tactics character. It's not impossible that we get a Yamamoto who is a tactics character. Yeah, we're bumping up against the end though. We're bumping up against the end of this sort of road. Oh man, SSR Komomura would slap. I know not everyone's there with me, but it kind of would though. Yeah, we're bumping up against the wall. We're bumping up against the wall of characters to release in this typing. I know that people don't want a, they don't want a new type, right? And it's fair. I said again in the Discord, I was just talking in there. There was. It's twofold. I think they wanted to release a new type. I just don't know if they want to release it now. They said they didn't really have any plan to release one sooner rather than later, but TYBW shows up for them. Shueisha, because in the devs' head, they probably thought, I guess we'll just release Arrancar until Shueisha gives us a go-ahead. But Shueisha shows up and says, hey, we're doing Core 4. You can do TYBW and all the plans change. And I'm not saying that's Shueisha's fault. I'm just saying that when that shows up to you as a developer, you go, okay, we'll pause. We'll stop everything. Okay, we'll do it. So I think that it got moved up quite a bit, and this was probably a bit of a long-term goal because they did talk about new types. They just said that it probably wouldn't. Because remember, there was that void type. We thought like, oh, Okieta is going to be our first void unit, right? So it's possible. It's very much as possible as anything else that they knew they were going to do a new type. They just didn't know they were going to do it yet. But yeah, I mean, there's not too much more to yap about. I think this is what I'm looking at. I'm seeing as our possibilities. If you wanted my opinion, like say they, and this is gonna piss people off. If you wanted my opinion on, say they decide not to do the supports immediately, and maybe Candace does end up being general. Maybe Candace does serve as like the I don't know, support for Strike or something like that, and she's like kind of, and it is a universal typing. I think Noituda is really possible because of his model being in game for just so long. It's so easy to just add him because he's low hype, low hype. I like him, but he's low hype, and again, people want to pull for damage dealers, and he could just be a tactics unit. I think we do see something, again, a replacement for like a Soifon, and we do see something like a Komamura or a Baragon or what have you. I think Shunsui, again, is like another character they could just add in. At any point, Kenpachi could get replaced. At any point, Kenpachi could be replaced, and I don't think people would be too sad just because he's been around for so long. You know, Kenpachi, again, is one of those characters who's just been around forever. But yeah, let's stop that. We don't need to, you know, we don't need to do this again. You know, I had already made the list before. But yeah, what do you think? What do you think about the sort of potential releases after the fact? I think TYBW is, this collaboration has entered its, like, we know what's coming, so we're not as like, ooh, what's gonna be, what's gonna be. If it's a new type, it's a new type for everyone. Sorry, I was napping before, a little tired still. If TYBW is a thing and it's a new type, then it's a new type for everyone, and so on and so forth. So it's less hype to sort of speculate what that's gonna be. The funniest thing that could happen is Candace ends up being the best character in the game because she's a support. That would be funny, because imagine we leave a celebration with Bambi, True Shikai Ichigo, and Yuryu, and Candace fucking Catnip ends up being the best character in the game. But yeah, we have a lot of potential kind of hits, I think, coming out of TYBW collab. I'm really excited because not only is the Arankar arc good, but we don't know. We just have like no idea. There's so many things that either need replacing or need a support that it's like, whoa, what could it be? You know what I mean? So yeah, I've been Lone though. Like if you like the video, subscribe to it, and a couple of go make it in. Peace.